Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm taking you on a journey through 5 areas in the Midlands that locals actually avoid, and trust me, the stories from Sparkbrook and St. Anne's are something you haven't heard before. I walked these streets myself, saw things that you won't believe unless you've been there, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why people stay away from these places. So stick around, because some of what I found will really surprise you. If you enjoy exploring real stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my future videos. 1. Handsworth, Birmingham. The first time I walked into Handsworth, I did not come with fear. I came with curiosity. It was early evening, the kind of time when the sky turns grey but the streets are still awake. The shops were open, people were moving fast, and cars were passing without slowing down. At first glance, it looked like a normal area trying to survive another day. As I walked further, the feeling slowly changed. The streets felt crowded, but not alive. People avoided eye contact. Everyone looked like they had somewhere urgent to be, even if they were just standing. I noticed shuttered shops with old signs still hanging, like they were forgotten in a hurry. It made me think about how long this place had been struggling. The air felt tense. Not dangerous in a movie way, but heavy, like something bad could happen at any moment. I remember stopping near a corner shop, pretending to check my phone, just to observe. A police car passed slowly, not with sirens, just watching. That moment told me more than any statistic ever could. As I kept walking, I could hear raised voices in the distance. I did not stay to find out what it was about. Locals walked past it like it was normal, like they had learned how to ignore things for their own peace. That scared me more than shouting itself. When problems become normal, you know an area has deep issues. What stayed with me most was the feeling of being watched, not by one person, but by the area itself. I tightened my grip on my jacket and became very aware of my surroundings. I realized why locals tell visitors not to wander here without a reason, especially at night. Yet, I want to be clear. Handsworth is not empty of good people. I saw families, shop owners, and kids laughing near a bus stop. But the pressure on this place is real. Years of crime, poverty, and neglect have left marks you can feel without reading a single report. When I finally left, I felt relief, but also sadness. Handsworth felt like a place that never got the help it needed, and people learned to live with fear quietly. That is why locals avoid it when they can. Not because they hate it, but because surviving every day takes energy, and sometimes the safest choice is simply to stay away. 2. Aston, Birmingham. I arrived in Aston on a cloudy afternoon, not too late, not too early. The streets were busy, but the energy felt rushed, like everyone was trying to finish something before the day turned dark. I told myself I was overthinking, but my body did not relax. Something felt off, even before anything happened. As I walked near the main road, the noise was constant. Cars, buses, shouting, sirens far away. It felt like the area never truly rests. I noticed groups of young men standing near corners, not talking much, just watching. I avoided staring, but I could feel eyes following me as I passed. That quiet attention made me uncomfortable. I tried to focus on small details to calm myself. Old houses packed closely together. Shops with metal shutters halfway down, even though it was still daytime. Broken glass near the pavement that no one bothered to clean. It felt like signs of long-term stress, not a sudden problem. At one point, I stopped near a takeaway place. I wanted to step inside, but I hesitated. 2 people outside were arguing in low voices, sharp and tense. It did not look like a fight yet, but it felt close. I stepped back and kept walking, telling myself it was smarter not to get involved in anything here. What hit me hardest was how normal all this felt to the locals. People walked past tension like it was part of the air. A woman pulled her child closer as she crossed the road. An old man shook his head at something I could not see. These small reactions told a bigger story than any headline ever could. I checked my phone even though I had no message. It was just an excuse to pause and breathe. In that moment, I understood why people say Aston changes after sunset. Even in daylight, the pressure was visible. You could feel that things could turn bad quickly, without warning. When I finally left the area, my shoulders relaxed without me noticing. That alone told me everything. Aston is not just a place with problems, it is a place where people stay alert all the time. And living like that drains you. I do not believe Aston is full of bad people. I believe it is full of tired people. People who learn to be careful, quiet, and ready to move away if they can. That is why locals avoid it when they have a choice. Not out of fear alone, but out of self-protection. 3 Spark Brook, Birmingham. I entered Spark Brook in the late afternoon when the light was starting to fade. The streets were busy, almost too busy, with cars parked close and people moving in every direction. At first, it felt alive, but after a few minutes, that feeling slowly turned into pressure. The noise never stopped, and it felt like there was no space to breathe. As I walked, I noticed how close everything was. Houses packed tightly together, small shops squeezed side by side, and narrow streets filled with traffic. It felt crowded, not just with people, but with problems that had nowhere to go. I kept walking, telling myself to stay calm and observant. What caught my attention was how often people looked over their shoulders. Not everyone, but enough to notice. I did the same without thinking. It was not fear exactly, more like awareness. The kind you develop when you know things can go wrong quickly. I held my phone tighter in my hand and stayed close to the main road. Near a junction, I slowed down. A group of people were arguing loudly. I could not understand every word, but the tone was sharp and angry. No one around reacted. Cars passed, pedestrians walked by, and life continued. That moment made me uneasy. When shouting becomes background noise, something is not right. I passed several shops with security cameras pointed straight at the street. Some had metal shutters pulled halfway down, even though it was not late. That detail stayed with me. It felt like the owners were always preparing for trouble, even during normal hours. As I continued, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt nervous, but another part felt sad. This place was full of people, families, and businesses trying to survive. Yet the tension was always present, like a shadow that never leaves. I imagined what it must be like to live here every day, always alert, always cautious. I stopped near a bus stop and waited, even though I did not need a bus. I just needed a pause. While standing there, I noticed a woman pulling her bag closer to her chest. A young boy was told to stand nearer to his father. These small actions said more than words ever could. When I finally left Spark Brook, the noise slowly faded behind me. My breathing felt lighter, and I realized how tense I had been without noticing. That feeling explained everything. Locals avoid this area not because they hate it, but because living under constant pressure changes you. Spark Brook feels like a place where people endure rather than relax, and that is why many choose to stay away when they can. For St. Anne's, Nottingham. I reached St. Anne's when the sky was still bright, but the streets already felt tired. The buildings looked old and close together, like they were leaning on each other for support. I slowed my pace without realizing it, not because I was scared, but because my body was trying to understand the place before moving further. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it felt between sounds. There were cars passing, people talking, doors opening and closing, yet the silence in between felt heavy. It was the kind of silence that makes you listen more carefully. I became aware of my footsteps and the way my jacket moved when I turned. As I walked deeper, I saw small signs that made me uneasy. Broken fences that were never fixed. Windows covered with boards that looked old, not new. Street corners where nothing happened, but somehow felt watched. I told myself not to imagine things, but my thoughts kept coming back to the same feeling. This place had a history, and it had not healed from it. I passed a group of people sitting on steps, talking quietly. They stopped when I walked by. No one said anything rude, no one moved toward me, but the pause itself said enough. I nodded politely and kept walking, pretending everything was normal. My heart was steady, but my mind stayed alert. What stayed with me most was the lack of comfort. Even in daylight, St. Anne's did not feel like a place to relax. I saw a mother calling her child back inside, her voice sharp with concern. I saw an elderly man lock his door twice before leaving. These were not dramatic moments, but they felt real and honest. At one point, I stopped near a small park. It should have felt peaceful, but it did not. The benches were empty, and the air felt still. I stood there for a moment, wondering how different this place might have felt years ago, before people learned to be cautious all the time. I checked my phone, not because I needed to, but because it made me feel grounded. I took a deep breath and decided it was time to leave. As I walked back toward the main road, I felt a slow release in my chest, like I had been holding something in without knowing. Leaving St. Anne's gave me clarity. This is not a place people avoid out of hate or rumors. It is a place shaped by long-term problems that changed how people live and move. Locals avoid it because they know what constant tension does to a person. And after walking those streets myself, I finally understood why. 5 Radford, Nottingham. I arrived in Radford just as the late afternoon light was fading. The streets were quieter than I expected, but that quiet had a weight to it. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that makes you notice everything, the uneven pavements, the boarded-up windows, the empty lots that should have been playgrounds or gardens. I felt my steps slow down without thinking, like the place itself was asking me to move carefully. Walking along the main road, I noticed how close the houses were. They were small, older buildings pressed together, each carrying stories I could only imagine. Some doors were chipped, paint peeling, as if people were trying to hold on but slowly losing ground. I tried to distract myself by focusing on the sounds around me, the distant hum of traffic, a dog barking somewhere, the occasional shout, but even the noise seemed tired. I passed a small shop that looked like it had been there forever. The shutter was half closed, and inside, a man was cleaning counters. He looked up as I walked past, gave a nod, but didn't smile. It was nothing personal, just the way people moved here, quiet, careful, wary. I felt a twinge of understanding, realizing that trust here isn't given easily, it's earned over time. Further down the street, I noticed a group of teenagers leaning against a wall. They were laughing quietly, but the laughter didn't reach their eyes. Something about it felt practiced, like they had learned to appear normal while keeping an edge ready. I crossed the road to avoid getting too close, though I was not in danger. My mind was tense, my senses heightened. I stopped near a small park, empty except for a bench and a single tree. The swings were still, the sand in the playground old and dry. It should have felt safe, a small moment of calm, but it didn't. I thought about what it would be like to grow up here, always aware of the streets, always learning when to move fast and when to stay quiet. That thought made me both sad and a little anxious. As I continued walking, I noticed subtle signs everywhere, neighbors whispering to each other, doors closing quickly, people moving with purpose. Nothing violent, nothing shocking, but the tension was constant. I understood why locals avoid walking around here without a reason. It's not fear of people, it's a deep awareness that every step matters. When I finally left Radford, I felt relief, but also a strange respect. This was a neighborhood full of real people trying to live normal lives in an environment that demanded caution. It wasn't about danger in the way headlines make it sound, it was about living with history, with challenges, with constant vigilance. That is why locals avoid it whenever possible, not because it's bad, but because surviving here requires energy most outsiders can't imagine. Walking through Radford taught me more about resilience and caution than any story ever could.